Welcome to the Geek podcast, where you have questions, we have answers. I'm Void, and I'm here with my co-host Beej.
I always have the answers.
I don't believe that. Today we are talking about, we're having a Q&A episode, because this is what we did last year for Thanksgiving week, and it worked out really well, and it gave us a week off. So we're doing it again.
Yeah.
Thank you for sending in questions. A bunch came in, and I love it. And if you keep sending them, like I said last week, I will keep gathering them, and they will end up in the next Q&A episode, whenever that is.
Yep.
Probably
and
not
I
even
love
going
these
to be
episodes.
like a year away. It'll probably be sooner than that.
No, there's a good chance if you guys send in a bunch of them that we'll end up doing it sooner, because it seems like you guys like this as much as we like recording these. So, like, these are my favorite episodes. That of any of the others that we ever do, these are my favorite ones to record. And then because they spark so much discussion, either in the subreddit or on Twitter, that people are always talking. Like, I love these so much.
Well, and one of my favorite things, too, is to see, like, our regulars come out, right? Like the people that I'm constantly chatting with on, well, you know, mine are like Reddit and Twitter, but like you're chatting with them other places too. Mm-hmm. Like I see the regulars come out, but then whenever we put out a call for one of these episodes, it's like a couple new people come out of the woodwork that have just like.
I got super excited going through these questions. I was like, I don't recognize this name. That's awesome.
Yes, exactly. That's how I feel every time I get one of those. I'm like, yes, someone else who's listening, and I know there's a lot of you out there that listen, that don't run in every week, but don't be afraid. We're normal people, I promise.
No, we like you. We want to be your friends.
Yeah, exactly. So
I want to be your friend.
We got to get started because there's a lot of questions.
Right, there's a lot.
The first question isn't even for you. It's for me because you asked it, and I'm going to answer it even though it was a joke. So you asked, what is my favorite breakfast cereal and why? And I've really thought about this. So I see my most often like eaten breakfast cereal is oatmeal squares because it's kind of healthy, and I'm like in my 30s now, and that is important. And I can also just like throw it into a bag and eat it dry, and I like that cereal. It's okay, but it's not my favorite. My favorite is probably Reese's Puffs because
they're so good. Yeah,
they have like no nutritional content, but they're just delicious. Like I also like a good bowl of like Cinnamon Toast Crunch, or sometimes like Oops All Berries. Those are okay. But I think Reese's Puffs strikes like the perfect balance between like cereal and just candy. So my answer is a Reese's Puffs there.
That's fair. That's a good one.
Yes.
The Reese's Puffs are good. Like, I'll give you Reese's Puffs are really, really, really good. They do make the absolute best cereal milk. That Reese's Puff cereal milk is the best, but I have to say that by not saying Fruity Pebbles, you're wrong, because Fruity Pebbles are the best cereal.
No, you're wrong. Okay, Capsule J asks, what makes something too anime or very anime for you guys? Or he says, just talk about your thoughts on anime in general, since there seem to be a lot of elements of anime, and we're into some and others we're not. You have a blank spot here for this question, so I'm going to go first.
Okay.
Because I don't know exactly what makes something too anime, and it's more like I know it when I see it, is kind of like my gut reaction.
It's like art.
Yeah, it's like profanity and like, you know, the First Amendment and like what is acceptable and what's not. There's some law around like I know it when I see it, which is a really weird line, but I had to study it when I was studying media in college, and that's how I feel around anime. Like I can't really define it, but I know it when I see it. Like when I see something and it is too anime, it is instant. Like I know right away that no, that's too anime for me. And then like in the general thoughts around anime, most anime just doesn't visually have enough like motion in it to keep me interested. Like I worked in video and as an editor for too long. If you just sit on one still shot, it does not hold my attention. It is bad video. I don't think it should exist that way. So a lot of these seem like
manga you would really like. You would see that as more of a print format.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, like, a lot of anime that people have recommended, once I sit down and try to watch it, a lot of it is just still. And I know it's better than it used to be. I know there's a lot of, like, exceptions to that rule. But I feel like I see too much of just, like, still with, like, some mouths moving. At that point, just put it into a comic book. Put it into Magnum. Like, put it into whatever. It seems like there are better formats than video for these. And then the other thing that really trips me up around anime is that the stories are just so slow. Like almost no anime has a good pace all the way through it. And I know part of it is that it's not a typical 3-act structure. It's not a Western structure to a story.
It's not a Western structure. Yeah, that's actually what I was going to say. It's an Eastern storytelling structure, which is very off-putting to us.
Yeah, and there are some that I have watched anyway, even though they have that structure. It's okay. It's more about the pace that structure unfolds that just drives me crazy when there's nothing happening. Like, even
Right.
some of the anime seasons that I've watched all of, there are episodes where, like, nothing happens. And everything that happened, I could have guessed within the first minute of the show.
Yes.
But now I just watched 25 minutes or 22 minutes to get to where I knew we would get by the end of it. Like, it's just a waste of my time at that point.
That's endearing on some shows like Dragon Ball Z, where that's kind of the gimmick of that show that they leaned into after a while. But yeah, I get that.
Any other thoughts around anime from you?
Well, for me, it's something where I think it's a level of absurdity and ridiculousness. Where I know it may have been Capsule J who mentioned this to me about Kingdom Hearts. Like, I love Kingdom Hearts, but it is super anime, and I've really been thinking about that. And I think the reason that I can really invest in Kingdom Hearts is because it's not something I'm watching. That the ridiculousness is broken up. That if I were part of what makes something too anime for me is not making any sense at all. That a lot of animes are because of the structure, because of the way that the narratology and storytelling works, that they don't tie everything together explicitly, and it just doesn't make sense. So whenever I see something that is immediately like totally absurd and nonsensical, that's the point at which I start to feel as though it's too anime for me. Also, completely spastic stuff that I'll see, like Little Witch Academia, 3 minutes and 47 seconds into it, I'm like, nope, this is going to get on my nerves, just because of
that
how...
one was very anime.
Yeah, very anime. So if you want to know what's too anime, look at Little Witch Academia. That one is. Sword Art Online is not. I like it.
Okay, yeah, there you go. Some benchmarks. Next question from him. Several of my in-real-life friends and internet pals get frustrated by movies that start slowly, but at the same time enthusiastically recommend TV shows that don't get good until episode 3 or 4. So in one case, 1 hour of slow content is unacceptable, but in another, 3 hours of slow content is okay. Any thoughts to why this might be? Yes. I've thought about this a lot. I have thoughts on this one, because pacing drives me crazy. Again, it's the video editor in me trying to make things better than they are currently. So I think the key here for this example specifically is that a show will end in the given time period, whereas movies, you are committing to like 2 hours plus. And I think just knowing that at like the outstretch, you're sitting down for... depends on the show, but it's probably either 22 minutes, 42 minutes, or if it's like a streaming only show, then you're somewhere in the 50 to 60 minute range. But you know what the running time is before you sit down, right? You know that you have an out. So you can watch an episode and know if it's for you or not for you. And it's kind of like this point where no one is giving you permission, but it feels like the universe has given you permission to make a decision on whether you hit the next episode and keep going, or if you take a break, or if you stop completely, or if you're going to go to bed for the night. Whereas if you sit down for a movie, you're talking about like 2, maybe 3 hours of actual, like, I am committed to this, right? There's no good breaking point in the middle. And like, there are days where if I'm just catching up on watching stuff, I will sit down and watch 4 hours of YouTube videos that I just have queued up one after another, right? Just catching up. But in that same time, there's no way I would have watched a movie just because I don't want to commit. I don't want to commit to that. Yeah.
That's exactly the way I am. It's the committing to a movie that gets me.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you can see this with the way that I watched like the Marvel Netflix shows, right? Every single one of those seasons I watched in 1 or 2 days. And some of them are like 10 hours of content. But in that same time, I didn't want to watch any movies because a movie is too long. It's just like too much to commit to. It feels like too big of a commitment. There's too many other things that have my attention. And with kids, I never know when I'm going to get interrupted. Like, it's rare for me to go 20 minutes without getting interrupted. I have time set aside for this podcast where my wife is watching them so that I can do this and I won't get interrupted. And already tonight, I've gotten 2 or 3 knocks on the door that I've edited out that you guys haven't heard, or I muted my mic. Like, this is the way my life is, right? So trying to watch a movie and actually get into the mental state of enjoying it without, like, I'm just going to get interrupted. Like, it feels like there's no point in trying to get there when I just can't with my life. Those are my thoughts, though. What do you think about it?
And mine is close to that because I do think that the runtime has a lot to do with it, because when a movie starts out really slowly, you see that you have 90 minutes, and if you spend the first 30 minutes that it's slow and boring, then the next 60 may not make any sense, or you're not connecting and engaging with it, so there's not really a reason to move forward with it, but you've already committed. So I think you're absolutely on it with that. And with TV shows, we kind of expect that now. Like, the formula for a lot of TV shows is you put out a decent pilot, then you put out a decent enough second episode that's probably not quite good, but it's in the same format as the pilot, and then the third tries to change it a little bit and get more into what the series will be and establish the tropes and conventions of that show, but while still like keeping the viewers. And then episode 4 is really when you can move forward and start doing new things, because people have committed or not at that point. They've made that decision on a TV show. And I've talked to TV writers about this, that like the lady who is doing who did Scream on MTV, I cannot remember her name right now, and Clark Perry, her husband, who they're from this area, and so I've sat down and talked to them about it, and this is something that they plan out for that. Like, they know how to get people to watch TV because that is what they write for. They write in that formula so that by the time you get to episode 4, that's when it gets good on purpose, because of the way mainstream television viewers are. Because if it were that good to begin with, most likely people would bounce off of it. And it's super weird. It's a mental thing, but that slow burn gets people invested in TV, that we as a culture and as a viewing audience look at movies, and we make that investment decision beforehand, that we either are invested when we start, or we're not because we don't start it at all. Like me, I just don't watch movies. Like, I don't watch movies when I'm sitting down because they're so long, and I don't want to stop a movie in the middle, like you said. So I just watch shorter TV shows. I watch YouTube videos or something like that. But it's the way that we consume those pieces of media, and how we want to commit to them beforehand or during, because of the breaking points. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, no, those are really good points. That's interesting. Talking to writers about it too. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Ava N asks for Void. Oh, for me. How has your attitude changed towards live stream gaming and gameplay since you used to enjoy Day 9 so much? I think that the main thing is that there's just so much more of it now.
Yeah.
And I can't keep up, so I kind of gave up on it. And then the other side of it is that when I was watching it, this is gonna sound so hipster, but it was like it was before it was not before it was cool, because that's not right. But I was watching it before it had money in it, before it was like big business, which it's turning into now. Like,
yes,
people are making their living off live streaming, and that wasn't really true when I was watching it. And whenever you introduce money into something, it changes it, which goes into the next question. She also asked, and this one's for both of us, how has live streaming changed, and is it more mainstream now? And I would say it's so much more mainstream than it used to be when I was watching it. Again, back to the hipster feeling, but it's just down to that money that goes into it, right? Once you introduce money and you have some kind of monetization structure, it's going to affect everything else around it in so many different ways.
And I see it as like live stream. I've never been a video game live streaming person. That is not something that I care anything about. It's one of those odd man out gaming things from last week where I kind of feel the odd man out on that. But part of my job now is doing a live stream every week. And I'll probably be doing it for the race that I'm training for and doing live streams for Geek Fitness. But for me, the way that it's changed is exactly what you said. It's a business now. That the way that you get engagement, the way that you really draw in your audience and start interacting with them is through live. Live video does so much better than pre-recorded video for us as a company that we are always in meetings, our content team meetings every week. We're talking about how we can move forward with our live video strategy. We have been fighting with live streaming software for months now, trying to find the right setup that gives us the most ROI in terms of not even just cost of the software, but the time it takes to set everything up, the quality of the video, the number of platforms that we can stream to at once. We have staff members waiting in the comments of these live videos so that the talent on screen, the one who is going through the video, doesn't have to stop what they're doing to answer questions until predetermined times, like within their script. They're the ones who do that, like to read and interact, so that we can answer questions from the audience and field them. And it's a business. Like, we've been having to work out the logistics of live streaming as a brand and as a company, which is something that used to was absurd. That the idea, and it's because Facebook and YouTube and all of these different platforms, Twitch, has made it so that, especially on social, that live streaming gets priority within the algorithms, that they want to push it, so they have to push it. So it's changed so much more that
it ties into, I'm sure you guys have seen like articles out there about media organizations that are traditionally like written journalism pivoting to video, right?
Yes.
It's a big trend in the last like 2 years here, is a pivot to video. And that is because of this. There is money to be made in video. That being said, if you are a media company and you have an established base of writers writing like written words on a page, do not pivot to video. That is a horrible idea for your organization. As someone who works in the digital world, like, that is bad. Don't do that. You're going to destroy your business in a bunch of ways. What you want to do is slowly build up an internal video team over time to complement your writing. Like, that's the right way to do it, which also, it kind of sounds like it is what your company is doing.
It is.
Okay.
When I was hired on, part of what got me the job was the podcasting experience, because I was used to talking at microphones and cameras like this. Not so much cameras because we're not video, but because I was used to being someone who talked to an audience a lot. And so that transitioned into video. And our other hire that came on at the same time, she is doing live videos all the time. We have a video specialist who that's all he does. And then the other content guy is doing documentation, where he's a web design front end guy, and now he's doing video documentation and transitioning into doing tutorials live online. That it's something that we've all been a part of before in some way, but now we're transitioning those hard skills into more of the that's what the jobs are, because we're not purely writers even when we get hired on.
Yeah, and I mean, you can look at some companies, I'm trying to think of gaming examples that like started out as purely written and have like made the transition in a smart way. Like Polygon is a really good example, because they built out this internal video team and have slowly been expanding it. Waypoint is one that from scratch, they built up like the written side and the video side by side in a very intelligent way. There are ways to do it, but again, it all just ties back to the fact that people don't actually know how to monetize video in the right way yet. Like, anyone who tells you they figured it out is wrong, and they just happen to be kind of in the right place at the right time, and it's working for them now. But I guarantee that almost none of the current monetization models for video are going to be functional long term. Like, from what I know of the digital space where I work, plus all of my media background, like, the way we are right now is not sustainable for video. It's just and I don't know if there's going to be a hard collapse. I don't think I'll see that happen, but there's a shift, and we're not to the end result yet. Like, we haven't actually landed on the right model.
There's been a shift, and it started 10 years ago, roughly 10 years ago, and it is still going on. We know a little bit more than we did then, but we've honestly not progressed very far from where we were in 2007. And I think that you're absolutely right, that nobody's figured this out, that they're in the right place at the right time. They've lucked into being able to do it, but they're not the kinds of people that you want to take advice from, because if they're saying that they figured it out, then they're going to lose that stream because they're relying on someone else and something else.
Well, and if somebody is telling you the way that they got to where they are, it's already too late for you to take that path.
You cannot do it.
The time has passed. Like, you have to find a different way to get there. It just doesn't. That's not the way these things work.
And I've tried to do that in the past. Yeah. Speaking from experience, it does not work.
No, it doesn't work. Okay. So we had tangents on that one, but that was good. It was fun to talk about. Matthew Palmer asks, what's the point of an early access game and what does it really mean now? And the example that he threw forward was PUBG, which PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, they just passed 20 million copies of it sold, and it's still Yeah, it's going to be one of the games of the year if they actually release it this year. So they're just past 20 million sold, and it's still technically in early access. So my opinion on this one is that early access means nothing now. It doesn't actually, as a term, it's completely useless now, because if you can purchase a game for real world money, then in my mind, it has launched. Like, no matter what, right? No matter what label a developer or a publisher throws on it. We used to have real betas where it was like you just got into the beta to help test out the game.
Man, I miss real betas.
Yeah, in some ways I do, and in some ways I know why we are where we are right now. But like those don't really exist anymore. So, long running early access games, my other thought around them is that they lose a lot of their like launch momentum because they get the momentum when they come out to the public. As soon as you can buy it, right? That is when early access games actually get all the attention. And then whenever they say it's a launch day, they get almost no attention. Like, I'm thinking about like Ark Survival Evolved, right? That game launched sometime in this last year. I don't even know when, but it did. I don't know when.
Yep.
And it's like, it's been out for like a year or two at this point. I mean,
and everyone I knew was playing it when it went into early access.
Yeah. As soon as you put a product there for anybody to spend money and buy and get that product, it is live. Like, it is launched, So that's how I feel about PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds also. It's launched. It has been launched most of the year. The early access label is just an excuse for developers to like keep a game in kind of a under development state, but it's not a label that helps us, is where I feel.
And it's not a label that helps them. It's becoming and early access by 2020, but we will be looking at early access games, and they will have changed the term for early access by then. And it's just going to be launch, because the press and everything initially treated early access games as just that, early access. That these changes, the brokenness, the bugs, the glitches, all of that was fine. Now, when we're getting to the point where you can sell 20 million early access, like access to it early, you like you said, you lose everything. But the press is going to stop treating it as though it's early access. Players have already stopped treating it like it's early access, and you can see the entitlement in the communities when something goes wrong, as opposed to back in Star Wars Galaxies Beta 3 that I got in, when the game broke, we were like, oh yeah, it's beta, it's fine. The only early access that I really think still has any kind of weight, that really is early access, are online games that are bringing in new content, that when you pre-order, you get access to the expansion 3 days before people who didn't, or something like that, or a week ahead. Like, I like stuff like that. I got on Star Wars The Old Republic earlier than anybody else. Like, I was one of the first people in the country to log on to The Old Republic, because I got up and was clicking the button over and over again just to get in early access, because that's the early access that mattered to me, not being able to go on Steam and buy a game that is at version 0.06 as opposed to 1.2.
Yeah, it's really weird. It's a weird spot that we find ourselves in with the gaming industry. Okay, this is where last year we would have, normally, if we have a weird structure, we try to throw like our geeky offer of the week in the middle, but we're not going to do that this week. I'm just going to ask for reviews, because we almost never ask for reviews, and it's getting to the holiday season. So if you want to get us a holiday present of some kind, leave us a review. I actually have no idea how to do this in iTunes anymore, because iTunes completely destroyed the way the podcast app works. You used to have to search for us as if you had never heard of us and then go into the podcast and rate it. That may still be true. It may not. You also might have a podcatcher like I do that's completely not the built-in one. So wherever you listen, if you can rate or review, we appreciate it, and it's amazing. And we try not to ask for it every week. We try to ask for it very rarely, so that maybe sometimes when we do, like this time, you'll actually do it. Maybe, possibly. That's all. Moving on. Chelsea from Tea Time asks, any good books you two have been reading? What is the best thing that happened this week? What's your best meal this week? Lol. She put it as one big statement. You can go first. Right. Go for it.
Okay. So I'm still reading the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. It is still just as wonderful as I remember it, and even the slow parts aren't as slow as I remember. So maybe it's nostalgia, or it's that 2020 hindsight kind of thing where it's not as bad this time. So that's great. Let's see, what was the other one? What was the next one? The best thing that happened this week, since we're recording this at the same time, I started running again and have registered for the Star Wars half marathon. Like, I'm still super pumped about that because we recorded the last time I talked about it like 30 minutes ago. So I'm still super pumped. And the best meal this week was the one I had right before this. My wife makes this absolutely fantastic hot quinoa salad with butternut squash and onions and like red and white quinoa, and it's got an orange vinaigrette that she makes. It has mustard in it, but it doesn't taste like mustard, and it's got chicken on top, rotisserie chicken on top. Oh, it's so good, and I just want to eat more of it right now with onions and bell peppers and stuff roasted, and roasted pecan, like toasted pecans on top of it. Like, absolutely the best meal I've had this week, and I'm going to be nomming on that so much.
Sweet. So books. I try to share most of my good books on here, so I don't think I have anything new. I've been super busy at work, just like you have. And when I get really busy, reading is actually like one of the first things that falls off for me, just because I can't find dedicated time for it in my day. So I'm still picking away at that Star Wars short story book that I talked about a couple weeks ago. It's still good. I just have to finish it. I'm like halfway through, and I just haven't had time to read in the last week or two. Best thing that happened this week was watching my daughter work her way through Mario Odyssey and then beat it. She beat it like last night. And
Your daughter's beat it before I did.
Yeah, I'm always so proud of her when she beats a game.
That's
because
awesome.
she works really hard at it, and it has taught her like perseverance in a way that nothing else I could have ever put in front of her would have taught her perseverance in the way that video games has done. So every time I see her actually like beat a game, I'm just insanely proud. So that was like my moment of the week, was seeing her do that. And best meal this week, probably wine and pizza, because it's like my favorite meal. Wine, pizza, and chocolate afterwards is like, that's the best combo. I don't think it can be beaten by anything. Maybe fresh bread. Fresh bread's pretty amazing. I haven't had fresh bread this week, so wine and pizza it is.
Wine and pizza? Okay. Yeah, I don't like wine, so I have to say I've never done that.
You and I need to talk about that at some point then.
Okay.
Fuzzy Cow asks, your wives both make things for hobbies, knitting and woodworking / carving ? Describe one of the coolest things they've made. You go first.
Okay, so carving wise, my wife does pumpkins, and one of the things she made for her dad that I've seen a picture of, but it was on a real pumpkin, was her dad's name is Wayne, and she had made a stencil and carved him as Waynenstein with this like almost photorealistic pumpkin carving of her dad as Frankenstein named Waynenstein, and that was really awesome. And then she's also made our patio table that she found some turned legs on the side of the road, and then went and made this beautiful tabletop and frame and painted it up, and it's just absolutely wonderful. And she's going through a woodworking class right now, and she's about to make my desk. So in another like month or so, then the desk that I'm recording this on. But right now, our patio table.
Cool. I like that. So my wife has made so much knitting. At this point, I've seen so many. I was really trying to rack my brain for like what stood out. And she at one point made this super intricate lace weight shawl, which if you don't know, the weight is like, well, how do you say it for someone who doesn't know knitting? It's like the thickness of the yarn. It's also called like, right. It's not the gauge of the yarn because that's something different in knitting, but it's like how big the yarn string is. Does that make sense?
How the thickness of
the like the thickness of the yarn,
the radius, the diameter,
all of those things tie into it.
String to yarn ratio.
Sure. So you can have like super bulky weight yarn that you could knit up an entire scarf in like that part of a night. You know, right. Or you could have like lace weight is the opposite end of that. It's like the finest yarn that you can get. So she made a lace weight shawl that had this like insanely intricate pattern in it. And I just remember seeing it when it was done, and it was like, it just blew me away. Like, and she's done a couple other ones, but I think it was the very first lace weight shawl that she did. It just still stuns me that she could make that.
Wow, yeah, I've seen a lot of her stuff on Facebook that I love when she adds something new to her yearly knitting album that I see, and it's always just astonishing stuff. She posted this week this very, very cool, I think it was a sweater. It wasn't a shawl, but a full sweater that I had to zoom in on when she posted it because I was like, that looks really good. And then I zoomed in. I was like, man, that is intricate. Like you're your wife is really good at this. Like, I'm impressed, like, on a daily or weekly basis, however often those pop up, that I really like seeing them.
Yeah, she's very impressive. So I always like seeing her stuff. I always like what she's working on. She's working on some slippers right now, so it'll be cool to see those when they're all done. Yeah, I'm always interested in, like, the latest project, whatever it is. Another question from Fuzzy Cow. Who is a real-life figure that you look up to and why? I'm going to say my mom, because my mom and I have very similar personalities, and she is the one that I go to for advice more than anybody else. And then also, like, at this point, I already see similarities between, like, our career trajectories and, like, our life decisions and stuff. They are lined up enough that, like, I can always go to her and she kind of knows where I'm at and where I'm coming from, which is super nice. And I already see this in my daughter, that, like, she has the same type of personality that me and my mom do. So I wouldn't be surprised if my relationship with her ends up being similar to the way I am with my mom. But that, I mean, at the end of the day, that's the answer, is, like, the person I look up to in real life is definitely my mother.
Oh, that's so sweet. Your mom's awesome, though.
She is awesome.
So, I
agree.
I totally do get that. I think mine might be Brian Inman, the dude who does the oatmeal. Honestly, because every single time I read anything that he does regarding running, it makes me motivated. Like, I don't really look up to a lot of people. Like, I know that sounds weird. It's not even I don't mean it in the egotistical way that it sounds like. It's, I don't really think about stuff and people like that so much. But in terms of, like, being a figure that I look up to, it's like, he kind of has it figured out for the guy who used to be fat, runs marathons, kind of gets, organized races, kind of that thing that I would like to aspire to at some point.
Cool. Yeah, I can see that. That's a good one for you. Okay, Fuzzy Kyle also asks, also, we know almost nothing about your musical tastes. I get that Void uses his headphones as a way to jack information directly into his head. Yes, as an aside, that is very accurate. Good job, Fuzzy Cow.
That's very good, yeah.
But what does Beej listen to all day? Does Void even have time for music with all the podcasts he keeps up with? This is a very good question. You can go first on this one.
So Beej listens to nothing all day. I generally work and sit in silence. That my brain really does focus on one thing at a time, and I get so easily distracted that even when I'm playing video games like MMOs or online games, like even Overwatch, things like that, I turn the music off. That I don't. Final Fantasy is really one of the few games that I keep the music on or up on, that most of the time I'm sitting in silence, not listening to anything. When it does come to music, I will turn on things like 90s radio, because I've suddenly become an elderly person who only listens to the music that I grew up with, and or middle-aged person, I guess I should say. And when I listen to podcasts, it's honestly rare that I'll listen to podcasts these days, but I listen to a lot of marketing podcasts, tech podcasts. But music, I'll listen to a lot of stuff. Say Anything, Alkaline Trio, still listening to Hamilton all the time. Saves the Day, lots of mid to late 2000s emo and emo punk that my wife absolutely hates. She hates my taste in music. I also listen to a lot of Disney soundtracks. Fall Out Boy. Yeah, I listen to Fall Out Boy a lot. I saw you type that, and I'm like, oh yeah, how can I forget Fall Out Boy? Dude named Dylan Hodges, who puts out music under Fire Kid, super awesome. I listen to him a lot because of he does chip tunes on a Game Boy. That a lot of his music is synthed literally through a Game Boy Color that he has attached to his stuff, and like, he is super talented, and I saw him in concert and was just blown away. Like, great. Yeah, I'm one of those people who I honestly say I don't really like music, because it's something that I could honestly take or leave, but when I listen to it, I get kind of into it. Like, I'm super glad Metallica is on Spotify now.
Yeah, okay. I was working ahead. Yes, you saw me typing stuff because I was trying to remember it before I forgot it. So I listen to music, but I've never really been like a music person, if that makes sense. There are people where music is such a key part of their life, and they like it's a hobby for them, right? In the same way that like video games and reading are like hobbies for you and me, where like they will devote a lot of brain power to, I have to find new artists, I have to like research or learn about this band, I have to go experience live music. That's not me at all. No. But I do like music. It's just that like I don't seek out new music, and I never have, not even as a teenager. Like I wouldn't go out of my way to find new music. So other
people would tell me about it.
Yeah, other people would tell me about it and I would give it a shot, but I would never actually go like searching for music. That's not the kind of person I am. So I basically listen to the same stuff that I always have, and I really use it as a tool instead of like a fun hobby. It's when I need to zone in on something. So I oversee so much like marketing and digital marketing stuff. It really depends what mode I'm in. If I have to like write an email to somebody, or if I'm doing copywriting, something like that, I work in silence the same way you do, because I need to like actually hear the words in my head in a way that I don't when I'm doing other things. But if I am doing like data or analysis, or if I'm putting some assets together, or if I'm working in code, or doing logic trees for automations, and like my job covers such a range of things, right? I use it as a tool to zone in. So when I do that, like I listen to techno, I listen to soundtracks, like video game soundtracks for the most part that I like, but some other soundtracks too. I listen to Hamilton. That is a regular part of my rotation now because I love it. And I still listen to a lot of the bands from like that I listened to as a teenager, and I still listen to. So Fall Out Boy is probably the thing I listen to the most above everything else. Like that is the one that I know all of their albums so well that it can be background music for almost anything I'm doing, as long as it's not copywriting. And then on top of that stuff, like My Chemical Romance, I still listen to, even though I'm not and have never really been emo. It's just, I don't know, I like the music. And like I Fight Dragons, I still go back to that one because it's kind of like chiptune-y, but also kind of in the same vein of music I like. There's other stuff. There's like Jack's Mannequin and some others, a little bit of like Jimmy Eat World and
Jimmy Eat World, brand new,
yeah, some of that stuff. But again,
except for like, brand new recently.
So I'm not a music person, and I don't make time for it. Like I don't go out of my way to make time for it. But yes, I do listen. If that answers your question, hopefully. Obviously, neither of us is very big of a music person. Our Kieran asks, is there a specific video game or system you credit with really getting you dedicated into gaming? Yes. The answer is yes. For me, it's the NES, and I think it is for you too.
Yep, it is. Maybe the Atari 2600 because I had it first, but really Nintendo.
I've literally never touched an actual Atari console in my life.
Oh my goodness. No.
Yeah, I have not ever played with one of those. The NES.
I want you to at some point, because the joysticks feel different than you expect them to.
Oh, yeah, I totally would. If I'm ever like in a room with one, I'll try it. I just haven't ever happened to be there at the right time, the right place. The NES, it is my earliest gaming memory is being like 3 and being in, I went to daycare at like somebody's house that was like a daycare provider, being in the basement with her kids and a bunch of other kids who went to the daycare, and all of us playing Super Mario Brothers, like the original one on the NES. Yep. That is my earliest gaming memory. And then very shortly after that, my uncle gave me and my brother his NES because he was done with it. So those two things combined are what hooked me into gaming as a hobby, and I've never really stopped.
Yeah, mine was Adventure on the Atari 2600 that really got me in. That was what got me playing RPGs and stuff like that, was playing Adventure, and I realized how fun it was to explore and find things. Yeah. That really, really, really got me.
Cool. Do you guys balance weekly geekery? Oh, how do you guys balance weekly geekery with work, family, and sleep? It's a good question. You go first.
Okay, so geekery is actually what I tend to cut out the most. Like with work, family, sleep, geeking, everything. That's why my geekery tends to be much shorter than Void's is most of the time, because whenever my wife had a bad anxiety episode a few years ago, and that I had one following that, we learned that sleep was the most important thing to our mental health, was that we had to have sleep hygiene, that that you go to bed near the same time every night. You get up about the same time every morning. And whenever something like that happens, I have to cut the non-essentials out. And Geekery is the one thing that I have to consider non-essential from when it comes to like work, spending quality time with my family, exercise, that cooking, that kind of thing, nutrition. Reading is before bed. Video games I don't get to play nearly as often, and a lot of it is simply because of sleep. Like I have to prioritize that over it because of mental health. Otherwise, I would be staying up till 4:30 in the morning playing World of Warcraft, and then go into a deep spiraling depression over Christmas break that has never happened, and that is not me speaking from experience at all.
Okay, it's. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I already knew that because you and I talk all the time. I just hadn't thought about it in this context before, that like sleep is important for your mental health. And it's interesting because mine is also, the choices I make here are because of my mental health, but the end result is different. So for me, it's also a constant struggle. Basically, it's like family first, then work, and then making as much time for myself as possible, and then sleep. Because I know the thing that will drive me crazy is if I don't carve out time to do things that I want to on my own, like alone. Because I'm an introvert and because I need that time to recharge. Like I'm a people person, I'm good with people, but I need time to recharge. And if I don't have that, that will send me into a spiral that is horrible to be in. So I will always cut sleep before I cut like my free time activities. Like I will go on 4 hours of sleep in a night if I have to, because I haven't done something for myself in 2 days, you know? And there's a balance to be had there. Like, but I will always cut sleep over cutting some time. And it doesn't even have to be a ton of time. Like I don't go down to 4 hours of sleep because I'm spending 6 hours a day on gaming. It's like I need an hour, right, to play a game or read a book or something. And it's just like between work and family, sometimes if I just add that extra hour in there, I'm already down to like 4 or 5 hours of sleep in a given night. And the other part of this that's different is that I have kids. So I know what like true sleep deprivation feels like. And I know my limits. Like one of the things I tell people who have never been parents is that before I had kids, I didn't realize that you can crave sleep in the same way that you crave food. Like,
I've heard that, yes.
It is a thing that I never experienced before having kids, but then after you end up in these like sleepless nights for the first 2 or 3 months of your kid's life, you have this physical craving that feels almost exactly the same as when you are just starving, right? And you are just craving like one specific food, and at the same time, you're as hungry as you feel like you've ever been, and you just need that pizza, right? Like, you know that feeling. All of us know that feeling that I'm talking about. There is an exact equivalent of that for sleep. And parents know it. Like you run into it as a parent. And other people know it too. I know other people have tons of other situations. But for me, that was when I first encountered it. So because I've been through that twice with my 2 kids, I know what my limits are and how much sleep I actually need to get in a night. And it's about 5 hours. I can get by on about 5 hours. 7 is better for me, so I aim for that, but I rarely get it. I usually sleep more like 6-ish hours a night. Yeah, but that's where I cut. I cut sleep to make time for other things, and it works for me. But obviously,
and that is,
you are opposite of some of those things.
One of the reasons we don't have kids is because those sleepless nights really wouldn't be fair to the children. And like we would literally lose our minds. Like it's not even me saying that. Like it would spiral so badly that it would be nervous breakdown time.
Yeah, that's totally valid. Okay, is there a game your family, like wives or kids for me, really got into that you weren't expecting?
Mine, Jennifer started playing video games with Castlevania Order of Ecclesia on the Nintendo DS. She had never played a video game before. Like, her friends and everything never taught her how to play Mario Kart together, wouldn't take the time. She never had video games growing up. But the first video game that she ever got into was my best friend Luke at the time, Luke, bought me a DS Lite and Order of Ecclesia when I started my PhD program. And she grabbed it and was like, oh, this is cool, and started playing it and had me beat the bosses because they're Castlevania bosses, and she had never played a video game before, but she loved the style and everything else of the game. And so it was like, she stole one of I had a big DS, the first DS, the big brick of a gray one, and she stole it and started playing that game, and I never got to really play it because she did. And
that's kind
so
of a weird onboarding point, but
yeah, isn't it though? It's
whatever
just like
works.
I was not expecting that. So there was that. And then right now she is still playing Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. And she is losing her mind on it because she loves it. Like, she has started beating her chest like Donkey Kong occasionally. It's so funny. She's like, "Arr, arr, arr." And it's great. And she likes it better than Mario Odyssey.
Wow, that's a big statement.
She does not like Mario Odyssey that much, that she doesn't like open world adventure games and exploring. And so like she hates anything open world. And that's so funny because of what you're typing right now. But like if it's open world, like she doesn't navigate 3D space well. She doesn't like looking and exploring for new things. She likes to be able to go and play and have fun. So the side scrolling 3D games like Donkey Kong Country, where they do new things with the backgrounds and all this, great for her. She just poked her head in the room and just went, y'all talking about me. And but yeah, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, didn't expect it, but it just makes me so happy that she loves it so much.
Cool. For me, so for my kids, it's not really games that I wasn't expecting them to get into. It's more of like the depth that they latched on to certain games. So for my daughter, Animal Crossing New Leaf, she still plays that almost every single day. Like she checks on it. Yeah, she checks in on her town and her village and like all of her villagers and all that stuff because she's the mayor of a town and she wants to interact with them. So she doesn't play it a ton every day, but she plays it almost every day, which is super interesting. I didn't expect that.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And then for my son, the fact that he latched on to ARMS and he's still playing it actively is kind of surprising because the rest of my family has fallen off from it. Huh. But the one that he really has never stopped playing was Smash Brothers. So Smash Brothers on the Wii U, he plays that multiple times every single week, and he has ever since I got it in the first place. So that's kind of like the surprising part for the kids, is you never know which one they're really going to truly latch onto as like a long-term game. But for the most part, before I ever put a game in front of them, I know whether they'll kind of get into it or not. That doesn't surprise me very much. For my wife, the interesting ones that she's gotten into, Mass Effect series. So the first Mass Effect trilogy, she was super invested in it. Like, she watched me play all of it, and it was like, put down the knitting and actually watch parts of it, which is when you really know she's serious about it.
Yeah, for real.
And then open world games for her too, because, and the open world games, it's not the same way that Mass Effect was like put down the knitting, but it's more of like when she's looking at what I'm doing, she likes to just kind of like, if I'm playing Hitman, like, hey, go kill that guy, or like stab that guy with a whatever, right? It's more of like a challenge that she adds on for me, or an instruction that's like, do this thing in the game if you can actually do it. So anytime that I've played Assassin's Creed or Hitman or GTA, when I played like Red Dead Redemption, she liked all of those games a lot because she'd be like, Red Dead Redemption, go grab that person and throw them on the train tracks in front of the train. And I'm like, that sounds hilarious. Let's do it together. And we would.
Okay.
So it's that kind of thing that she'll occasionally latch onto. And it's not every game. Like, she didn't care for Assassin's Creed Origins, which, hey, just backs up my point from the other week. But yeah, it's interesting to see when she does latch onto those.
That's really neat. When Jennifer plays a 3D game like that, like Red Dead, or it was DCUO that she got into for a bit, her favorite thing is standing on things. Like, she's been doing this in Mario Odyssey as well, that she'll find cool places and work as hard as she possibly can to get to the top of it and then take a screenshot with her standing on top of something. That is her favorite thing in video games, is to stand on top of stuff.
Yeah, I know. You told me that before. It's interesting. But hey, if it works for her. Okay, last question from this person is, will there ever be an episode with Beej and his wife? I would love to hear about the stuff she makes.
Yes, we talk about doing it all the time and never actually sit down to record. We talked about doing a Logan episode. We need to, once she finishes up with this woodworking course, that would be a really good time, because she geeks out on woodworking like I geek out on running. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's kind of like you and I had decided that these would be good first guest episodes for both of our wives as soon as the other person had a conflict, and I just haven't had a conflict yet, but it'll happen one of these days.
Yep, absolutely will.
Yep, it will happen. Data Error asks, is there anything that you used to really geek out about but have outgrown or just fallen out of love with over time? This one for me is easy. Cartoons.
No.
I know you like cartoons. I just don't. I can't get into them anymore.
The thing is, I love kid cartoons. I don't like adult cartoons. Like this is where everyone in the audience right now is going to be like, "What? I don't like Rick and Morty. It's mean spirited." And I like things that are fun and whimsical cartoons. Like I like the stuff that you probably really hate.
Yeah, I don't like anything that's a straight up cartoon. Like I just can't get into it. I mean, some things that have animation that go along with them, sure, but not things that are cartoons designed as cartoons. I just can't latch onto them.
Oh no, I just love cartoons. Like that's it for me. Yeah, I understand that though.
But you have one. I'm looking at it.
For me, I've fallen off on Doctor Who.
I know you have.
That I used to love it so much, and then it just clicked, and I was like, nope, I'm done with it, and I do not care. That I want to. I'm like, I want to watch this new female Doctor. I want to watch the Lady Doctor, but I don't care. Just
okay.
I used to love it. And I was all in. Now I'm just like, okay, it's there. It's a thing.
Yeah, I come and go with Doctor Who depending on who the Doctor is at the given time. Right now, I don't care for the Doctor at all. But when they reboot with the new female Doctor, I will give it another shot. And hopefully I like that one as much as I liked Matt Smith. That was the one I probably liked the most.
Okay.
Okay, last set of questions from the last listener who sent them in, which there's still a few questions in here, but we're approaching the end. Stabbed by Coffee, which is a fantastic username.
Great name.
I love it. Asks, do either of you feel that there was a definitive moment or time in your life where you realized that geekdom was going to be part of your daily lives, or a particular time where the geek switch was flipped and you knew it was what you enjoyed? So for me, it's interesting. I think it happened slowly over time that I knew it would become like just a part of my life forever. But there was definitely a time when I noticed it for real. And it was a couple years after college where I got together with a bunch of friends that were like high school and college friends. And I realized how many of these people that used to be playing video games at the same time I did and playing the same type of games and being invested in them to the same level I was, just didn't play any games anymore. Like, they completely cut them out of their lives, and it just wasn't one of their hobbies, you know? They went and got married or got into other adult things that are stereotypical, like going out and drinking with friends at the bar every whatever. And, like, I did some of that. I have a wife, I have kids, I have adult things, but, like, I never let go of that gaming piece, and so many people I know did. And that was the moment, like, sitting at one of my friends' apartments, talking to all these people and catching up with them and realizing that I couldn't actually talk to these guys about games anymore.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same way with that. Like when I was a kid, like I got into it because like my parents were playing video games. Like when they got it and they played them as much as I did. And I have a Super Nintendo because my dad played Star Fox at Sears, and finally they just wanted not have to go to Sears to play Star Fox. And like he was a super nerd, and I was reading like these ancient like Mysteries of the Ancient World Time Life books that he had. So it was always there as a part of my life. But as I got older, it was that I just never stopped liking it. I never really felt as though I was too old for it. And as like my friends got into drinking and partying in college, like yeah, I did it too, but I was always still like in love with Wookiees and dragons and spaceships. And I'll never forget, like there was this time where I was subscribed to Star Wars Insider magazine for a very long time, and it was before episode 3 came out, and there was a particular issue that had a green cover with some of the new never before seen Wookiees on it. And I had a PO box, and my buddy Luke went with me, and he I went and opened it up, got my mail, and got back into the car, and he was still sitting in the passenger seat, and I just kind of tossed my mail over, and on top of it, when it unfolded, like I put it on his lap, and it was the Star Wars Insider with the Wookiees on it, and he just kind of looked down at me and looked down at the magazine and looked over at me. He's like, I really wish that I could say this meant that you would never have sex again, but it doesn't. And it was like that was when it really that was just part of who I was, that there wasn't a there wasn't a change or anything, that it wasn't going to be I'm going to change who I am to be an adult. It's like, nope, this is part of who I am, because it was like, yep, I wish I could say you were never going to have another girlfriend again, but I can't. That kind of thing.
I mean, so it's the same kind of thing. It was this slow fall off, but then there was a point that both of us realized it, which is, it's interesting that that's kind of the way we landed. Okay. Is there a particular part of geekdom that doesn't really interest you personally outside of esports, which already you guys know based on our episodes? Right. I know between fandoms becoming more mainstream and the rise of internet, geek has expanded to include many more topics and people than it did 10 or 20 years ago. So here's the thing for me. Everything interests me. Everything. I'm an extremely curious person about the world.
Yes.
The rub is that there's a limited amount of time in a day. So, for example, fan fiction, right? 2 of the podcasts on the network in the last week just had episodes about fan fiction, and I listened and I was extremely interested, but I don't have time. Like, I'm barely reading the books I want to read right now, the novels that I want to get to. I don't have time to like finish all of them and then also go read fan fiction on top of it. It's really about how many hours there are in the day. Right. And that is where most of it comes from. So the answer to your question is no, there's nothing that I'm not interested in. But the spirit of answering your question, there are some fandoms that I just don't ever see myself actually engaging with meaningfully. And so I guess like I don't think I'm really a cosplay person. I don't know if I would ever do that just because it's not something that I see myself engaging with. Anime is another one, which I know we already talked about anime this episode, but like my likes in anime are so few and far between that I don't ever see myself engaging with like the wider community around anime in any meaningful capacity. And so hopefully that answers it.
Yeah, it does. And I'm like you, like I know about a lot of this stuff. I've had people say, is there anything you don't know about? And the answer to that is really no. Like a couple of weeks ago, I was like, I can talk about pretty much anything when I was at my conference, and this guy just walked up to me told me about polar bears. Like, and so I just started talking about how their skin was black and their fur was clear. I was like, did you know how this? And he just looks like, I didn't know that. He was like, I just randomly picked that. I was like, yeah, I know about a lot of things. And that's kind of the way I am with geekery stuff too. It's like, I know about this stuff, but like, I'm not interested in some of it, where it's just like, cosplay is one of them. Like, I like seeing really good cosplay photos.
Oh yeah, me too. It's super impressive. It's like interesting what goes into it.
One really good cosplay photo, and then I'm done. It's like, that's a really good costume. Good for you. And then I see instead an album of 30 images where they went and had this like model shoot and like then take it to cons, and I see all of these different con stuff, and it's like I'm not interested in cosplay culture. That particular culture, I like seeing the end result so that I can be impressed by it. I don't care anything about the actual cosplaying. And then specific fandoms, it's like I can't get into the Supernatural and CW fandoms and things like that. It's just not my bag. So many other people are, and I have a lot of friends who are super engaged in those, but it's like you said, I don't ever see myself engaging with those myself, even though I like them and enjoy the media properties.
So cosplay, I don't feel the same way you do about it. I'm still really interested in it. I just don't think that I would ever be a participant of cosplay.
Right.
It's different, right? Like, I see those albums of, like, how much work people put into things, and I'm super interested in that. Like, I want to know about the process. Like, I want to know about what went into it. And part of this just gets back to me being a curious person, right? Like, I have had conversations with people in real life over a drink about pumps, like industrial pumps.
Yep.
Because it was what somebody was interested in, it was what their job was, and they were super passionate about it. And at the end of the day, if somebody is passionate about something, as long as it's not like morally reprehensible, there's a line there somewhere.
Right, there is.
But as long as it's not morally reprehensible, right, which is most things are not, if the other person has passion about it, and I'm in a one-on-one setting, I legitimately want to hear all about it. And I will ask questions, I will engage with it, because that's the kind of person I am. You know, I do really well one-on-one. That's kind of my like preferred way of communication anyway.
And that's one of the things that I learned. I'm a lot of the same way, because I like seeing people get excited about things that they care about, like anything, like you said, like industrial pumps. One of my old dean was a botanist, and he was this very surly, rough, like not rough old man, but he was just this very surly, angry kind of person that you had to know how to deal with. And he and I got along along really well, but he seemed to be very hard to please for most people. And whenever he got talking about flowers, because he was a botanist, like his eyes would lighten, his voice would get a little bit higher, and he would just smile talking about these plants that he noticed and these flowers that he had studied. And it was just like, I loved engaging with him like that, because I saw pure joy on his face and in his actions like that when he finally got to do something that he truly loved. And the students said that too. Like in class, they said he was completely different when he was teaching botany than he was when he was teaching anything else.
That's really cool.
Like, I just love that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay, so the next couple questions actually tie into this one really well, which is why I put this set of questions near the end of the episode here. So, did either of you ever find a time where it was difficult coming across people with similar interests as far as geekdom due to where you lived or like when? So, the question asker says, born and raised in Arkansas, it was really difficult finding someone with similar hobbies, but when you did, it almost felt like a cause for celebration. So for me, the answer is like, maybe I've had some trouble in physical space, but I grew up in the internet age, right? Like the internet grew up alongside me. I know we've talked about that on the show before. And because of that, I've always been able to find people to talk to. And like when I was younger, it was fine. Like I had plenty of people who were into games, people who were into the same interests I was, and like geeky stuff. It's never really been a problem. But again, I've been a suburban person most of my life outside of a major city. So it's different than being in, rural wherever, or even just different from being in other parts of the country compared to where I am. So that wasn't hard for me. The hardest part of like finding people in physical space is actually probably right now for me.
Yes.
And like, again, I have plenty of people online that are my friends that I talk to all the time, whether in Slack or Twitter or jumping on headset to have a conversation, or like you and I, like we're constantly texting. We do a podcast every week, all that kind of stuff. But for people in physical space that share interests, like it is so hard for me to carve out time to like see somebody. It's just, and so there are people, I mean, like Rob, right, from the Comic Box, we live in suburbs of the same major city, but we are on opposite corners of the city. So
I didn't know that. I didn't know it was that far apart. Yeah.
Yeah, we probably live like an hour apart from each other because you have to drive around the city, maybe 45 minutes, but it's still a hike, even if we met halfway in the middle. And it's just like scheduling a time for me to do anything with work and my kids is like, it's next to impossible. And then the other thing right now that makes it challenging is the place where I work is mostly women working there, and a lot of them are like just out of college by like a year or two. They just have completely different interests than I have, which is fine. Like I love working where I work. I love everybody like in a professional capacity. Like I work with everybody great, but in other jobs I've had, there's always been a person or two that shared some of my geeky hobbies that you can kind of have a side conversation with, over coffee or like in the morning. How's it going? Did you see this thing last night? I have nobody like that at my current job.
Okay.
Which is fine, but it's different. And that's kind of why it's so hard for me at the moment.
I understand that. Like, I never had that problem growing up because even though we were a small town, like, we had a really thriving gaming scene. There was a card shop when I was a teenager where we had, like, from the time I was 14 and got into Magic the Gathering, we were playing weekly Magic tournaments. We were playing Star Wars CCG tournaments that even in my tiny, tiny town, we had put this together, and it was a big geek community there. And even when I was younger, we all kind of like not merged together, but we kind of just converged together and became really good friends. And college was the same way, but right now it's kind of what you were saying, that physically I don't have a lot of people now in my life who they game or do anything, because like you live in Minnesota, my other best friend lives in West Palm Beach, Florida, or North Palm Beach, Florida, and it's like, okay, so you are the two people who I would play the most games with in person out of even the people I have here. It's like, that's impossible. So I don't do that very much here. A lot of the stuff here is back in Magic and a lot of D&D stuff, and that's not really my scene anymore right now. So I don't have that physically now, but it's the internet. Exactly like you said. I do this stuff to geek out. I'm on Slack talking to people, and at work, because we're on Slack, we're able to do stuff like Katie and Chelsea and I on Slack will send gifts back and forth all the time with Rob, all of this. Like, that's how I get my geekery stuff in. But it used to be completely different. It's super weird. Like, as an adult, I have less time to be geeky when I should have more freedom for it. It's an odd feeling, but that's what the internet is for right now for me.
Yeah, I mean, adulting is hard. Okay, lastly, and this is the last question, do you ever worry that you'll eventually get to the point where your geeky hobbies don't hold as much interest for you as they do now? I was always told as a teenager that I would eventually outgrow these hobbies and take on what is considered adult hobbies. But at this point, I'm approaching 30 and I'm geekier than ever. And this is a really good question.
Yes,
my answer is no. I do not worry about this. These things have kept me, these geeky things that I'm into, they have kept me constantly and consistently entertained since I was 3 years old. Like, those are my earliest geeky memories.
2 for me. Yes.
Yeah, like, I'm in my 30s now. Like, this is who I am. This is what I enjoy. I'm not worried about that. The thing that I do notice is that I go through phases of, I don't want to say burnout, but definitely of like leaning into different things with different levels of intensity, right? Like, right. Gaming is almost always my top one. And then there's TV, there's movies, there's books. There are times where I won't watch a movie for like 6 months, you know, or like the last few weeks here, I haven't read a book, but there are times where I won't read a book for like a month. There are also times where I feel game burnout and I just have to do something that's not a video game. And right. The thing is, I have enough of a variety in my geeky hobbies. There's always something else to like switch over to, but I don't worry in general that suddenly all of these are going to like lose interest for me, because it's just, at this point, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I think part of that for me is I'm the same way. The answer is no on this one, the short answer, because a lot of it is because we do care about so many different things. We're not just, like we talked about last week, those Call of Duty gamers, where that's the only game that we play, and if we get tired of Call of Duty, then we won't play any other video games. It's like when we get tired of JRPGs, we're going to move into MMOs or first-person shooters or something like that. But like, I burn out on specific, and I do burn out because I go so hard into one thing at a time.
Yeah,
like,
I'll burn out more than I do. Like, I have these levels of intensity that kind of ebb and flow. You really do go like full force into something until you get so sick of it that you don't want anything to do with it.
Exactly. Like Star Wars. I'm getting more excited for The Last Jedi now, but I went so hard into The Force Awakens that I'm only just now getting to the point where Star Wars is hugely interesting for me again. Right now, I'm feeling comic book movie burnout a bit, because that's like everywhere. Like, comic book media burnout, I should say, because it's just that there's so many TV shows, there are so many movies. It's like, right now, I want to watch something else that doesn't necessarily do that. And probably the closest to like getting adult hobbies is when I started losing weight, that my entire personality changed except for the geeky stuff. Like, everything about my life, how I lived my life, what I was doing, what I really paid attention to is different now. Who I am is a different person because of that, but it didn't stop. That was the constant, was like the sci-fi movies, the geekery, the video games, the kinds of books, all of that stayed as what I loved. It was just, maybe like you said before, it's the intensity. I'm probably going to focus on running or cycling or reading about macronutrients when I was probably read about the morning spoilers on IO9 or whatever's going on to make Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets turn out to be the way that it did. I'm probably going to be reading about exercise physiology and running, but that's really the closest for me, where I'm never going to not like this stuff because it's what I like. It's just kind of one of those things. It's part of who I am. It's part of my personality. And when my personality changed and I became really a completely different person, and that didn't, I'm fully aware that I'm all in on it.
That's awesome. It's always fun to do a Q&A episode, so don't be afraid to send more of them for later, because I will collect them as always. Next week we'll be back with a normal episode. You can write to us with comments, suggestions, or feedback. Our email address is geek2geekcast@gmail.com, or reach us on Twitter @geek2geekcast. We also have longer discussion threads on the subreddit at reddit.com/r/geek2geekcast.
And we're on Slack. Remember, please go to slack.geek2geekcast.com for your invite. If you're there at work like I am all day long, it's a good way to spend a little bit of time chatting. And we're also part of a podcast network, and we have everyone on Slack there, as well as at geek2geekcast.com, where you can see if any of our shows, Geekitude, Tea Time, or The Comic Box, tickle your fancy.
I blog at agreenmushroom.com, and you can find me at grnmushroom. That's green mushroom without the E's on Twitter.
And I'm on Twitter as @Professor Beej. That's Beej with 2 E's, and I blog at geekfitness.net.
We've been Void and Beej with your Geek to Geek podcast. That'll do it for this week. See you next week, geeks.
Bye. More questions, please.
Comics. Hey everyone, this is Rob, your friendly neighborhood comic geek.
And this is Liam, the languishing, lascivious Liam of Langley.
Wow, that was extremely illiterate of you.
Well, I try.
We are the hosts of The Comic Box, part of the Geek to Geek podcast network.
So join us.
Bop, bop.
Oh, yeah.